So we are behind the wheel of one of the most legendary cars ever produced. I'm driving this car pretty sensitive right now because it's just that special. This is a 959 example with about 3,000 kilometers, probably one of the best left in the world today. I would say of the 337 cars that were produced, and of that, there was about 37 prototypes. How many are left with these miles? I don't even know. But this car is basically new. I mean, we've left even, plastic on the seats. So you're not gonna see me flog this car today or drive it hard at all. We're really just gonna be doing, and I just stalled, that was pretty embarrassing. And we're really just gonna do some video, little behind the wheel, and some photos. This car essentially changed the supercar world. I mean, when this car came out, it was so shocking and such an advance in technology. We're talking twin turbo, 4-wheel drive, self-leveling suspension. I mean, this really wild hydraulic suspension. You had tire pressure sensors. You had all these different things, and this was made to go Group B racing. It was actually made also to go off-road racing and Dakar Rally and things like that. There's actually, if you look down at the shift pattern, there's a G, which I believe means in German Gelände. So that's your low gear for going off-road. And this car really changed the world in that sense. I mean, if you look at after the 959 was introduced, we have the F40 that was introduced as another Group B competitor, and you have all the manufacturers start to sort of use this car as a template, the XJ220, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this car inspired all future generations. And really, if you look at Porsche today, this was their first supercar as a road-going car. I had the incredible opportunity a few years ago to sit down with the former CEO, Mr. Peter Schutz. Now, he unfortunately passed away in 2017, but I'll never forget my afternoon with him. It was one of the most memorable experiences I ever had. And Peter Schutz went to Porsche during a period when they were struggling. Many people believe that he is responsible and say that he's responsible for saving Porsche, and actually specifically saving the 911. And really, the one thing I learned from Peter was about morale and I would say employee morale and company morale. And at the time, he had said that Porsche was in a very difficult place. Employee morale was at an all-time low. They hadn't won any major races in a few years. There were no flagship products, and Porsche was planning to move towards the 928 as their flagship model, slowly doing away with the 911. And he completely turned that around. There's a famous story where he drew on the life cycle of the 911 that will never end up, will never cease production of this car. And I mean, this car's like precision. It is so cool and very quick. These cars were 444 horsepower, 0 to 60. Imagine like 3.5 seconds in that period. So again, this is not a slouch by any means. But anyways, back to my Peter Schutz story. I had to push the car a touch. Peter was responsible for the incredible advancements in Porsche's racing division to boost company morale, and he was responsible for championing this car, which was deemed the Uber 911, the 959. Now, the reason, sort of, if you Peter never told me this, but as I did some more research, the reason, unfortunately, that Peter had to leave Porsche at the end of his career in '87 was because the 959 project was looked as a financial disaster. I mean, Porsche invested so much money into this car and developing this car that it is said that on each 959, Porsche lost almost $400,000 each car. So as we were saying, if you look back at Porsche's history and you start to look at these iconic cars, I mean, the Carrera GT, when it first came out, it didn't sell well. You could argue that it was a commercial disaster at first. People complained about the clutch, and it was way ahead of its time. Now looking back, I mean, people look at the Carrera GT as one of the most important supercars of our time. Then you look at the 918 as a hybrid. I think even Porsche struggled to sell the 918 when it was first out. I remember they were hosting events at different tracks all over, trying to get clients to put deposits on those cars. And now you look at the 918, and I don't think you can find a car under MSRP ever again. So you look at Peter Schutz, what he did for Porsche and racing, and what really the 959 meant. Originally developed as a Group B car, and unfortunately it took so long to develop that Group B was eventually phased out. And then what did Porsche do? They brought it to Paris-Dakar, the famous Dakar Rally, and they won first place, and a backup car actually placed sixth. So this was a car that was meant to break records. It was meant to be the fastest in the world, but at the same time, and even if you go verbatim to Porsche's original marketing materials, it was meant to be usable. And if you think about, the cars that we love, like Countach's and 288 GTOs and all these other cars from the 80s that were also basically, you could call them Group B cars as well, they were not very usable. And Porsche developed this car, and they used their prototypes to develop these cars so they were drivable, they were functional, and really they are, in many ways, this feels like driving a modern supercar that has all the same bells and whistles. Going back to things like, we were talking about the car's four-wheel drive, and it was the fastest car in the world. It was 197 miles per hour, 195 miles per hour in a Komfort version. The four-wheel drive system itself was actually electronically controlled. So we're talking about years, light years ahead. And then really, if you look at this car and you think of the 959, the twin turbo, and all these different features that were later applied to Porsche's production cars, and you could really call this car as the ultimate in R&D, the ultimate in marketing. God rest Mr. Schutz wherever he is, because we wouldn't have this car today without him. And it's just, it puts down the power so well. It puts it almost effortlessly. The AC is great. It's easy to drive. It's a modern day hypercar essentially, but was created by Porsche many, many moons ago. The other thing that I love about this car is when you talk to people that have owned them throughout time. One of our good friends, a fellow Countach lover and aficionado, Mr. Eddie Irvine, always tells me about how much fun and how much he loved his original 959. And owners that I've met throughout the years have really said, man, that was one of the best cars that I've had. It just did everything so well. It was so fast. It handled so incredibly well. So I only think these cars have a bigger future than we can even imagine. This is the car that put Porsche on the map from a, you could say it, a road car perspective. And I think continually we'll always look back at this. You look at the stance it has, the presence it has, this incredible figure, and you look at the technology, and I think the 959, like the Countach, like the Mura, like the F40, really changed the entire automotive world.